Welcome to today's session, Data Foundation for Analytics and AI, from data to outcomes at scale. This is a high-level session on data and AI, and you'll learn more about how you can leverage your data with AI to drive your organizational outcomes. Before we welcome him onto the stage, if you haven't already, could you please download the AWS Summit app via the QR codes on the screen. Please join me in welcoming onto the stage Francis, who is our Solutions Architect Leader for Data and AI at AWS.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize when I came here that I was following the footy, so it's an interesting place to be in. I wasn't particularly anxious until I saw that, but the lucky thing is I am here today to tell you my favorite story, and actually probably the story I tell most at Amazon, and that's the story about data foundations and how we see them evolving, and really the why of our technology. So why we're doing what we're doing in the data foundation space. We're standing in an exciting moment in technology's evolution. Everybody's racing to generate AI, generative AI. We've heard some amazing stories this morning in the keynote about generative AI. But what we're also seeing is that people are realizing that their data foundations are not ready. My name is Francis McGregor-McDonald. I'm the head of data and AI technology at AWS. And today I'm going to talk you through how we're revolutionizing the way that data foundations are constructed. Not just for today, but how they can evolve for the opportunities ahead. I'm super excited to tell you that story. Let's jump into it. It starts with this fact. 89% of CIOs and CDOs are diving into generative AI. And if anything, I think that number might well be an understatement. But what we're also seeing at the same time is that only 52% see their data foundations as ready, which is, giving people an interesting challenge. And what we're seeing because of that, what we're seeing as a really interesting change in that is we're seeing a renewed focus on data foundations. We're seeing people take a back to basics approach to strengthen their data foundations. And as they do that, they're facing a number of challenges. The first one of those is that the roles that we've typically had in a data team and in a data environment are changing. So we're seeing, for example, historically organizations had people that focused on ingestion, people that focused on ETL, people that focused on maybe business analysis. But we're seeing these roles blur together. Organizations are potentially even restructuring themselves around products. So whole teams are coming together, data scientists and data engineers working super closely together. And we're seeing this as a real challenge for organizations as they look at how they're structured. Additionally, organizations are looking at their current infrastructure and they're saying, how do I work moving forward without really just ripping out and replacing the things that I've got? How do I make the most of the investments that I've got? And then the third thing that we're seeing is organizations saying, how can I trust the data? And I'm sure all of us have heard stories about hallucinations, and every time we think about generative AI, we think about, can we trust that? So we've got these three broad challenges in the space. With these challenges, and they do seem daunting on the surface, we do have customers, though, that are moving forward super quickly. Siemens is an amazing example of that. Siemens is a large organization with an automotive division, with a healthcare division. They do building, they do a lot of things. They've got a 175-year legacy, and they're using multiple AWS technologies to change the way that they work. An interesting example of that. Their medical division, Siemens Healthineers, they connect to thousands of ultrasound devices around the world. And using AWS IoT, they've reduced the connection time and the sign-on time for those from 2 hours to 5 minutes. So an amazing outcome. Similarly, their mobility division uses AWS Glue and Amazon EMR to reduce kind of rail outages and unplanned downtime for rail operators. They've got a building twin division, actually it's called Building Twin, and they use AWS services to collect and analyze data from IoT sensors and other building systems. And then the last thing they're doing, which I really, really like, is they've built a data lake called Data Lake to Go, and it's collecting data into Amazon S3 and across AWS services from 190 countries. So huge scale coming into one place so that they can generate insights. It's a great example of how organizations can be successful in this environment where we've got all of these different types of complexities. But the success, it's not by chance. There's a number of factors that are built on and things that we built into the way that we architect our services and the way that we think about how we're moving forward with our services. And the first one of them is freedom to invent. A good example of this is millions of customers trust us to use Amazon S3, and in S3, your storage is available to multiple engines. Those of you that are aware of Bedrock, for example, are aware that one of the reasons we created Bedrock the way we did is so that you can use multiple LLMs. We're really building the freedom to invent into our services. Secondly, value. When we think about our cloud data warehouse, for example, Amazon Redshift, 3 times better price performance than other cloud data warehouses. Amazon Aurora, commercial performance at 1/10 of the cost. So we're really making sure that we've got freedom and we've got value. And then the last thing is guardrails and trust. One thing that we've always worked on, and we say at Amazon that trust and security is job zero, is ensuring that the foundations are solid and that you can trust the data and you can trust the systems. So, we provide comprehensive built-in security, 143 different certifications, encryption, and ensuring that all of your data remains private. These are the pillars that we lay out so that our customers can be successful. The freedom to invent means that you can innovate without constraints. We want our customers to be able to innovate without constraints, because your AI models in the end are only as successful as the foundations that you lay. And so we want to make sure that that works for you. And in that, we've got an unmatched experience of reliability, security, and performance. 19 years we've been running, delivering cloud services to over 2 million customers. And we're doing that across more than 100 petabytes of data footprint. But of course, we didn't stop there. It's in our DNA to constantly work back from our customers and think, we want to do this better. How can we solve that next problem? And how can we make things easier? And so what we decided, last year, and we announced it initially at reInvent, was we wanted to take all of our purpose-built services around data and AI, and we wanted to bring them together so that the hundreds of thousands of customers that trust us can make things easier. And we introduced the next generation of Amazon SageMaker, which is a center for data, analytics, AI, and generative AI. Amazon SageMaker includes virtually all of the components you need for fast SQL analytics, big data processing, search, data preparation, integration, AI model development, and all along with a single view into all of your data. The key thing with the Unified Studio, for example, is that you can see data that's in S3, you can see data that's in Redshift, you can see data that's in SaaS applications, you can see data that's on-premises, for example. You can link it to on-premises data. You can also link into data, for example, on other clouds. You may have seen a blog that we put out, for example, going to other clouds. And we do that through an open format. So all of your data in one place, and reflexively, I think often when we think about one place, some of us think, together and maybe locked in, but absolutely not. We've got an Apache Iceberg standard interface. So any of the engines that you've got can connect to that, and then of course we've got built-in governance across that. We bring it together, we bring it into one place with our Unified Studio because we like to think about innovation as a team sport. So when we thought about the Unified Studio and we thought about SageMaker, we didn't start with a traditional idea about how a data catalog works. We started with how do teams work. The model about how do organizations want to work with their data. So one of the constructs in that is a project. Organizations now are looking to build, data products, and people want to work together. We know that that's a team sport. We know that people want to do that together. So a single place where people can collaborate on model development, generative AI processing, SQL processing, and it integrates seamlessly. Those of you that have tried it already, for example, you'll jump into a notebook and you'll notice that within a single notebook, you can choose particular engines with a simple drop-down. So we just make it super simple to work together as a team. We also want to make sure that we support all different personas. Part of bringing things together through a single UX is so that we can make it simpler, and we also want to make sure that we make it simple for the types of users that you have in your organization. So whether you're using a notebook, for example, based around Jupyter notebooks, whether you're used to visual editors, for example, they're all in one place giving you a consistent experience across all of your tools. And then, those of us that have got developer backgrounds know that, let's just say back in time, maybe ETL people or machine learning people didn't have the best rigor around using DevOps processes and things like Git, it's all integrated with Git. So, as your organization moves into these environments, you're starting to enable teams that maybe historically didn't have quite the same rigor in their initial development processes, into DevOps processes, into secure processes, which is going to really increase your ability to move those experiments and those projects forward into production at the right time. So we build it with collaboration at its core because we see innovation, really as a team sport and something you do together. An example of that might be, a churn project, for example. A churn project, we've got, we create an individual product. We've got data engineers that bring, the data in. We've got SQL analysts, for example, that might run analysis on that. That analysis can be picked up by an individual that's doing either maybe that analysis or maybe a machine learning person that goes and builds a machine learning model. And then that machine learning model can get passed off to a Gen AI engineer, or it might be the same person who builds it, who does an LLM wrapper around that machine learning model to expose, the churn model as some kind of chatbot, maybe to an internal customer service agent. But everything's contained in the same environment. Everything's part of the same process, which gives you a really, simple development process and makes everything super consistent. And we do that because we want to break down silos. Many of us have kind of artificial silos in our organizations with their teams. We don't want to have that inside our systems so that it slows you down. Maybe show of hands here. How many people are using a developer assistant, a Gen AI developer assistant? Many people? Okay, only a few people. So, this is just one of my favorite things about SageMaker Unified Studio and development now in general is that I can be grumpy in the morning when I talk to my AI assistant. Things are just super easy in terms of development. If things get a little bit complicated and I'm not sure how to write a SQL query, for example, I can just ask Q. Q's built into SageMaker Unified Studio. If I want to do model evaluation, I can just ask Q, and I can do that in multiple languages as well. So not only are we bringing people together, but we're giving them all of the assistance of generative AI to build and to do this consistently. And remembering that with these assistants, we're not just building the SQL statements, for example, but we're also, for example, building out the README at the same time. We're also writing up the documentation about the project at the same time. We're also potentially generating metadata at the same time. So all of those tasks that maybe used to slow us down before, penetration tests, for example, all of those things that used to slow us down as we started thinking about productionization, we've got built into the platform Gen AI assistants for. Carrier has been one of our early adopters of the next generation of SageMaker. They're super excited about the benefits. They've got an amazing kind of seamless integration with their existing data platform. That's really key for us. We want people to be able to bring existing data assets, and they're seeing great advances in terms of the way that they're working. But when we think about business impact, we think about more than just tools. We need to be able to view, access, and act on all of our data. And what that takes us to really is the foundation layer. So we can think about the SageMaker Unified Studio in our development environment, but then underneath that, we've got the Sage, a lakehouse. And we've got a lakehouse approach because at the data layer, we want to break down the silos, and we want to give you access to all of your data sources wherever they reside. So the SageMaker Unified Studio is built on a lakehouse data architecture that's fully compatible with Apache Iceberg, and you can access all your data from any Iceberg-compatible engine of your choice. And I'll talk you through how we got there and why we did it that way. It starts with Amazon S3. This has been the foundation of our customers' data lake strategies. We've got unmatched durability, availability, scalability. Customers built more than 1 million data lakes on S3. And then, and the reason for that is this great combination of cost efficiency, performance, and security. But in recent years, open table formats have transformed how organizations manage data lakes by bringing SQL functionality directly to them. And we've really seen Apache Iceberg emerge as the leading choice there. And what makes Iceberg transformative is its ability to handle massive scale data sets while keeping those things simple. We've got simple SQL operations, they're all familiar, they work across multiple processing engines, and they allow us to maintain data consistency without being locked into a single vendor's ecosystem. Now, two things actually, I did a session at reInvent a couple of years ago about Iceberg, and the two questions that we got most often was, is this it? As in, it's so easy. So easy to use Iceberg. And the second one was, does it work at scale? And then we would point out that our customers and great supporters of Iceberg like Netflix are using it across all of their data. So just amazing performance and amazing simplicity really takes us from a situation where we have a traditional style data lake for our tabular data. We're moving it to something that works really, really well at massive scale like a database. Only AWS supports all three. And we're leading with Iceberg, we see that as our choice, but only AWS supports all three open table formats. So you'll be aware of Iceberg, you'll be aware of Hoodie, you'll be aware of Delta. Only AWS allows you to read and write with all three formats. So you can bring your choice of format. We do see Iceberg leading, but we want to make sure that you can read and write with your choice of formats because we do not want to lock you in. What we did see though is that as organizations adopted open table formats, there were considerations like compaction and other things that open table formats required that weren't required with their Parquet files, or at least not in the same way. So as this became a primary destination, we wanted to make this easier for our customers. And that's why we launched S3 tables. And this is the first cloud storage with built-in Apache Iceberg support. So where we would think about S3 as having an object as the base level, now suddenly we're thinking about an Iceberg table as the base level, which gives us an amazing ability to deliver database-like performance directly on S3. Along with that, you get 3 times faster queries, 10 times faster transaction rates. We're super excited by this. Within 2 months of launch, we had over 1,000 customers who generated more than 5,000 tables each, and we've got tens of millions of requests weekly going across this. And we're really looking forward to this becoming the standard for our customers, just to make things easier in terms of the structured data in their data environments. But when we think about data environments, and I mentioned before about existing assets, while S3 tables helps us keep things simple, we know that it's just one part. And most organizations start with either some data in S3 or a data warehouse in Redshift. And that's where we start, but then of course we need to grow and we need to think about our source systems. And this is where complexity can creep in. As organizations grow, you accumulate more data sources. Operational databases like Aurora, for example, DynamoDB, RDS need to be integrated. Similarly, external data from channels like Salesforce, ServiceNow, SAP and others. And before you know it, your architectures become complex. And so what we introduced here was zero ETL. Zero ETL really is the ability to move data from a source system into a data lake without a data pipeline. And again, occasionally when I talk to our customers about this, they have a kind of a light bulb moment. Those things that I needed to build before, I just don't need to build now. So we really want to make things simple so that our customers can really focus on generating data, generating value. So let's talk to me. Let's just summarize where we got to with the lakehouse. We bring together data lakes and data warehouses. We incorporate operational enterprise applications through a zero ETL. It means that you can bring in up to 15 zero ETL sources without having to build pipelines. But we didn't stop there. So we've got federated query connectors as well, and we've got glue connectors. And that can tap into on-premise systems, for example. Other third-party data sources as well. And on top of all of that, we've got our Apache Iceberg API to make everything exposed consistently through a single API. And then, again, you can bring any engine, EMR, Redshift, Trino, your Spark frameworks, so you've got access to all of this data from all of these different sources in a single way. And the bit that I really love about this, all with fine-grained access control. So we've got data across all of these different systems, no ETL required, federated connectors at the back, fine-grained access control across all of it. This is what a secure, open lakehouse looks like. Roche is a great example of a customer that's using a lakehouse. Data underpins every decision that they make, and with zero ETL integrations, they're bringing Salesforce CRM data into their analytics environment. They're expecting this to cut their ETL costs, their integration costs by 50%. So a huge reduction in cost. And for those of you that were maybe wondering about the costs of zero ETL, from AWS native services, it's free. So just imagine that historically you build an ETL pipeline, for example, between Aurora and Redshift, now it's free. And the data's in there with a P50 of 8 seconds. So I've shown you our complete integrated stack. Now let's talk about getting the most value from it, because we want to make sure that you don't feel like you need to change things. We think about an example that could get complex. Toyota's production line, for example, they have a fault that comes down the line. They're not sure where it came from. It could be a malfunctioning robot, perhaps multiple robots. It could be introduced by a line worker, or one of many potential factors. And to solve this, we need multiple people working together. So data owners, data engineers, business analysts, data scientists, and they need to collaborate. This is the challenge that Toyota's facing and solving at the moment using SageMaker, bringing together these tools. And this architecture, as an example, shows you how potentially complex an architecture is going to look and how we want to make things easy, because many organizations are facing these challenges. So, to come back to the future-proofing, this complexity is exactly why we reimagined to support interoperability. What we historically see is that when we go through what we at Amazon like to call one-way doors, situations that are not easy to reverse, it's about 7 to 8 years for a data investment. Every time you're making a significant investment, it's 7 to 8 years. So we want it, and it's painful, and it slows things down. So we know that pain, and that's why we wanted to come back to this comprehensive Iceberg support. Iceberg is where the open source market is. Iceberg is where we're enabling you to put your data so that you no longer drive yourself into situations where you have to go through these significant movements of data and reinvest in terms of your data foundation. Again, we're basing this around S3. One of the amazing things about S3 is the unmatched cost efficiency. I love the fact that intelligent tiering is the only cloud storage that automatically optimizes for costs when your query patterns change. Canva is a great example of this. 230 petabytes of data on S3, they saved over $3 million annually by changing their storage classes. In fact, we like to talk about the fact that we reduce costs for our customers. Intelligent tiering has saved customers over $4 billion since it was launched. Remember, this is intelligent. This is happening in the background without customers having to do anything. From storage and complete, we want to make things simple in other ways. In model training, for example, SageMaker Hyperpod, this is our purpose-built infrastructure that includes built-in data and AI parallel libraries for distributed training, and it automatically monitors, your cluster health and remediates for failures. Perplexity AI, I love Perplexity AI, I probably use it daily. They achieved a 40% reduction in their training time using SageMaker Hyperpod. And this is the kind of acceleration that we're seeing for organizations. FanDuel, leading gaming company, they saved 80% on their costs by migrating to Amazon Redshift. So huge, huge improvements in terms of cost by moving to these serverless architectures. In their particular case, they moved to an architecture which was a combination of provisioned and serverless. And we're seeing similar, advances with operational databases as well. BMW, they migrated their mission-critical messaging system to Amazon Aurora. This system handles 10 million messages per hour. For 10 million messages per hour, they get 99.9% uptime, they have an 80% increase in scalability, and a 40% reduction in cost. So again, just these amazing outcomes in terms of the cost efficiency. We've talked about the freedom to invent, maximizing value, but ultimately AI hinges on data you can trust. And so we provide built-in governance right through the SageMaker platform. And I'll show you how we can do that. When we think about making our data ready for AI, we're dealing with structured and unstructured data. And it needs cleaning, and it needs enrichment, and it needs transformation. And in the AI era, this is different, of course, because we're not only preparing it for potentially human interactions, but preparing it for things like RAG. So, we wanted to work differently in this space. So metadata, for example, in SageMaker Unified Studio, we automatically generate metadata for your data. So for those of you, and in fact I got this question yesterday when I was talking to a customer, they're saying, one of our real challenges as we think about AI is how do we enrich the metadata? How do we understand what we've got? With SageMaker, we point the generative AI at a particular table and we say, tell me about this table. And it generates a full description of the table. It lays out all of the different column values, the suggested values. So we get all that transparency across our data automatically created. Okay. Because that is the biggest challenge for our customers today. We want data to be AI ready, and we want it to be available to the tools that people are using. And we want them to be able to do it in a way that's built-in governance, so that we've got that security right through the pipeline, so that people can move faster and safely. We do this with the SageMaker catalog. So we've got the Unified Studio, that's our development environment. We've got the SageMaker catalog, which is our way of sharing data. And I talked at the start about, we tried to think about SageMaker a little bit differently and about how our customers want to interact. Notice we don't call it a SageMaker data catalog. This catalog is built on Data Zone, and immediately we think of data. But in the SageMaker catalog, we can share data, we can share Gen AI assets, we can share compute. So suddenly, as an organization, we're no longer thinking about sharing just the data, but we're also thinking about sharing the capabilities that our teams create, which really changes the way that we interact with our data environment and brings us together into a marketplace, which is no longer just about our data, but is really about generating value. We've got semantic search, powered by Gen AI, which gives us much easier collaboration and much easier understanding about what's in the environment. And that gives us the ability really to just streamline our entire data preparation process. We've got guardrails as well. One of the key things that we're also seeing in generative AI is that people are concerned, so we build guardrails into the catalog. So inside the catalog, for example, we have open lineage, for example, we have data quality, and we have all of those other capabilities that customers ask for in terms of their security. Toyota is implementing these to address siloed data across their organization. They're using SageMaker, they're using AWS services to unify and govern their data. And this is really allowing them to search, discover, and share data effortlessly. Okay. In the age of generative AI, a key to success is really to fully utilize both structured and unstructured data. And so for unstructured data, we create vector embeddings. We've got your choice of vector stores. So you can use Amazon OpenSearch, for example. You can use Postgres, you can use Elasticache, you can use MemoryDB. For structured data, and some of you may have used it already, we treat vectors as a native data type, similar to spatial data, which just makes them super easy to work with. And then we've got SageMaker and Bedrock knowledge bases to tie into those vectorized data stores so that we can power our Gen AI applications through RAG. I've talked to you about how we can unlock value from our data in AI. What it's crucial to remember, of course, is that your data is your competitive advantage. Context is everything in generative AI in the age of AI. So, it should stay that way. With security, we've got 143 certifications, we've got encryption at rest, we've got fine-grained access controls so that we've got the most secure cloud. For resilience, we've got multiple AZ configurations, we've got 11 nines of durability in S3, we've got multi-region deployment options for your databases. And for governance, we've got continuous audits, we've got data classification, we've got incident response. And of course, crucially for generative AI, we never share your data with model providers. And that's why millions trust AWS with their most sensitive data. So you've seen how AWS helps you innovate with best-in-class data foundations to maximize value through price performance leadership and trusted data. There are a few ways that we can help accelerate your journey. We've got a data strategy team that's got former CDOs that can talk to you in terms of peer exec conversations to help you really drive forward your data flywheel. You can build Gen AI use cases with our Gen AI Innovation Center. You can develop expertise with 150 plus training courses on SkillBidder. And of course, we've got our extensive network of AWS partners who are there to help you along the way. Future of AI is built on data. You can scan this QR code. It'll take you straight to our SageMaker page to learn more and get started today. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. Please complete the survey in your mobile app. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for educating the audience and I more about how we can leverage data more effectively with the use of AI. Everyone, could you join me in thanking Francis with a round of applause for this session? In a moment, we will be putting the QR codes on the screen. Please do take the time to provide Francis feedback via the AWS Summit app. And lastly, if you could leave the headsets on the back of each seat before leaving, that would be great. Thanks, guys.